Giv jer thumbs up. Goddag og velkommen til denne uges udgave af Freaky Show, eller det bliver jo nok månedens. Det er anden udgave, hvor vi prøver at tage jer som seere en lille smule bag om kameraet, bag om scenerne, og se lidt på, hvad der skal til for at lave hi-fi, men også bare høre fra vores, jeg får at vide, at jeg skal tale lidt langsommere og ikke så højt, det beklager jeg. Men tage jer bede med om kulisserne, om hvordan laver man hi-fi, hvad skal der til, og hvad er det for nogle mennesker i øvrigt, der gør det her. Jeg er i selfie cam mode i dag. Jeg tabte lige på store kamera på vej på trappen, det beklager jeg meget. Så det bliver lidt interessant, men vi prøver i hvert fald. With us live we have Peter Comeau, Acoustic Director from IAG. Peter, can you hear me?
I can hear you. It's good to be here.
That's great. How about the guys in the studio? Can you hear Peter?
I hope you can.
Great. Peter, could you tell us a bit about what it is you do at IAG? And just to clarify, International Audio Group, that's Wharfedale, Audio Lab, Quad, Mission,
Castle.
There's plenty to go for.
And now LEAK, yeah.
And now LEAK. What is it you do there?
I'm responsible for all the hi-fi loudspeaker design. So my title is Director of Acoustic Design. So it encompasses quite a lot of things, including listening in on what the electronics guys are doing as well. But I design all the loudspeakers for hi-fi.
So you are, well, yeah, it's in the title, Acoustic Director, but you decide how it's going to sound in the end.
That's right, yeah. Yeah, me and my team, we're very committed to producing really, really good performance, whatever the brand, whatever the model.
So then, well, I think we should just dive into it. With me here, I have the brand new Elysian speaker. And I imagine you had quite a finger on the pulse with this one, or a lot of say in it. Could you tell us what went on in designing the Elysian?
Well, I think we should sort of take a little look back in history here, because Wharfedale's been known for the past decade, I would say, for what we would call very affordable loudspeakers. And that's not a bad thing. I'm not decrying that at all. I love making affordable loudspeakers because we can make something which give a lot of people enjoyment throughout the world. But Wharfedale has always had, since the beginning of making cabinet loudspeakers, what we would now call a high-end loudspeaker. And I really wanted to do the same again. We've had a high-end loudspeaker in China, but it wasn't really suitable for the world market. So Elysian is our new flagship loudspeaker for Wharfedale. And it really gives me a lot of enjoyment to design a product like this, simply because we can put an awful lot of advanced technology and new research into the design.
Yeah, that's what comes with an expensive speaker. You get the cutting edge and the best of the best, right?
That's right. Yeah, I mean, you can use materials and spend a lot of money on research, which you normally wouldn't be able to do with the more affordable ranges.
Very cool. Can we talk a bit more in detail maybe about what is happening inside this speaker? What is special about the drivers, for instance?
Okay, so at the top we've got an unusual looking treble unit. This is called an AMT, an air motion transformer. And the most exciting thing from my perspective about this is that it's a method of delivering very low distortion and very high transient performance from what appears to be quite a sort of complex design compared to a dome. You haven't got a diaphragm that moves backwards and forwards. Rather, you've got a diaphragm which actually squeezes the air between folds in the diaphragm. Now, the advantage of this is if you imagine taking a lemon pip between your fingers and applying just a slight amount of pressure the lemon pip flies out at a very high velocity. And the same thing is happening here. The folds of the diaphragm squeeze together, and that forces the air out at very high velocity, about 4 to 5 times the velocity that you would normally get from just the movement of the diaphragm alone. So we get very good, very high efficiency, very good translation of the electrical energy fed to the speaker into the acoustic energy in the room. And that gives that gives us a low distortion, plus the high speed that we transfer that energy into the air gives us excellent transient performance. Now with the Elysium, we worked with the original design of the AMT isn't ours. An air motion transformer was the invention of Oscar Heil some time ago. But we worked with the concepts that he had, and we wanted to lighten the diaphragm as much as possible. Now that in itself is unusual. Most of the AMTs that you have found in the past, that you look around on the market and see maybe today in other designs, have got heavier and heavier diaphragms. And that goes, I think that goes against the principle for this, especially for a high frequency unit.
Can I ask just quickly?
We wanted to go the opposite direction to make something as light as possible. And that actually gives us a response. I mean, it was recently measured by a German magazine. There's up to 35 kilohertz.
Wow, and I've heard about super tweeters that you add in order to get the above 20 kilohertz range, but that then you really don't need it here then. That's just built into the speaker.
That's right. It's built into the speaker. I mean, I'm not that interested in, making dogs go mad and creating frequencies that only bats can hear. What is important about reaching above 20 kilohertz, whether you're talking about speakers or CD players or DACs or anything else, is that you push all the, in the case of loudspeakers, resonances, in the case of DACs, all the digital noise, you push it way outside the audio frequency spectrum. And that gives you a cleaner result within the audio frequency spectrum.
Very cool stuff. Can I just ask quickly, because this is and you call it an AMT driver.
Yeah.
I'm used to when I see this kind of stuff, I call it a ribbon tweeter. And that is not the same thing, is it?
Not at all. I mean, there are different types of ribbon tweeters. I think anybody who sort of looks, I mean, I've got one here. Anybody who looks directly at this thinks, oh, it's a ribbon, simply because it's tall and it's narrow.
Yeah, exactly.
There are various types of ribbons. The original ribbon was a very, very thin folded piece of aluminium. It was only folded to give it flexibility. It moved backwards and forwards within a magnet gap, just like a conventional speaker diaphragm. It's very nice to use. I mean, I like the original ribbons a lot because they're very accurate and very low distortion, but they're not very efficient. And they need a huge transformer in order to transfer the electrical energy from your amplifier down to the ribbon diaphragm itself. The other types of ribbons which you'll often see around are what we would call planar ribbons. They're a voice coil which is etched onto the surface of a flat diaphragm and positioned between magnets. And again, the point of those is to make the diaphragm move backwards and forwards. With the air motion transformer, it's not working like that at all. And I would hesitate to call it a ribbon simply because it works by squeezing the air out. The folds don't move backwards and forwards. The folds move laterally and squeeze the air between them. So it's a very different principle.
Thank you very much for explaining that to me. I know that was a bit confusing to me, and I know it will probably be to a bit others, because as you say, we're used to that. When we see something narrow and tall, we call it a ribbon. But what else do we see here? I see we have a mid-range.
So we're moving down to a mid-range which has a woven glass fiber diaphragm and a foamed rubber surround. The combination of those, the diaphragm's very light, the surround is very light, so again, we can get very, very good performance up to high frequencies. It has excellent and smooth natural bandwidth, gives us a very, very natural vocal response. And that's in its own enclosure, of course, and then from that we move down to the bass units, also a glass fiber, woven glass fiber matrix, specially coated with a surround which allows them, a surround and motor system, which allows them to move linearly over the frequencies right down, obviously, to the low bass. But what's really important with regards to the bass section is the way that we use the rear energy from those drive units to power the bass in the room. And that's where our slot-loaded profiled port, which is right down at the base of the speaker. I don't know if you can get down on your hands and knees and have a look at that. This is something that I worked on. It was based from an idea that I got from Gilbert Briggs' books back in the 90s. When I first started designing loudspeakers for commercial use in 1978, my Bible was Gilbert Briggs of Wharfedale's book on loudspeakers. It really opened my eyes to what was possible in loudspeaker design. And he'd done some work on slotted ports. If you look back through his loudspeaker book, you'll see them. So I wanted to continue that and bring it up to date and perhaps do more work with the understanding that we have now about how cabinets and reflex ports work, and turn it into something which I thought would enhance the power of the bass in the room, bring greater efficiency to a bass reflex system without encountering all of the distortions that you normally get. And the idea of the slot port is that it gets over the basic problems that most ports have, and that is that you've got a very, very high pressure inside the cabinet, a very high velocity of air coming through the port, and then that air suddenly meets the very low pressure in the room, and that's where all the distortion is developed. So by using the slot port, we can spread that energy from a high pressure interior, gradually feeding it out, almost like a horn loading, if you like, into the low pressure in the room. And I did that first of all in our Diamond series speakers. But for Elysian, I was able to expand on it by profiling the port, making it even more like a horn, so that I could get that pressure gradient to work even more efficiently. And so we get, we've measured somewhere between 1.5 to 2 dB extra output from the slot loaded port compared to a conventional port. And you can feel it with Elysian. You can feel the bass in the room, much as when you go to a live concert, you feel the bass.
I can confirm that one.
Hitting your chest.
And I'll just show our audience quickly. Victor, you'll have to look at the screen and tell me if people can see the full height of the speaker right now. Maybe a little down, Yeah, like this is me. Like this speaker it's huge. It's absolutely massive, and I imagine that also helps with that that bass that you can feel that you talked about, Peter.
That's right, and it not just helps with that, it also helps having a wider baffle, because we've been going, one of the things that has driven me crazy over the past 30 years, I mean, since I first started working at Mission in the year 2000, is that everybody has gone crazy for narrow and narrower and narrower speakers. And I remember at one point looking at some high-end speakers at an American audio show, and they were just loads and loads of little 4-inch drive units on the front of an incredibly tall cabinet.
I've seen a couple of those, yeah.
Yeah, and the designer was trying to claim that this was the same as having a 12-inch drive unit. Well, in terms of diaphragm area, it is, but not in terms of baffle width. And baffle width is incredibly important to a speaker because it determines the point at which the sound coming from the bass units enters the room as a sphere. And the lower that you can make that frequency, the more powerful the speaker will sound. So by having a relatively wide baffle speaker, we can get a much more powerful bass performance in the room. Never mind the size of the drive unit. The size of the baffle is incredibly important.
Yeah, I have to say, I'm still astonished about how large the speaker is. Though this is a wide model, so it actually seems small because I know it's sitting right beside the Evo 4.4, which I usually consider a large speaker. I think most people would. It's really beautiful. You did something great there, Peter, I have to say.
Well, that's thanks to my ID designer. I mean, I just work on the concept of where the drive units are going to go and what they're going to be, and he then puts. I work very closely with him in the UK, and he then puts the clothes on.
Well, you guys did an amazing job. I have to give you that. But then that brings us on to, you told me right before we started that the Evo series takes a lot of principles from the Elysian.
That's
And
right.
then what happens?
Well, again, with the Evo, you can see that we have an AMT for the treble unit. That's again, that's obviously taking the research that we did for Elysian and feeding it down. It's a smaller AMT. It's not as efficient. It's not quite as fast, but it still embodies the same principles that we developed for the Elysian. And we married that in the case of Evo to a 2-inch dome, and that we did that again to get the speed up. So we wanted a lightweight, efficient diaphragm that married to the AMT very well. And I'm delighted, having read the reviews of people saying it's got a seamless sound. They can't tell where the one unit crosses over to the other, and also has a very lifelike vocal range, which is something that I always aim for. I always want to have the illusion of people and instruments sitting in front of you playing. That's the most important thing that I think hi-fi can do.
I have to absolutely agree. And I think you're right. Sometimes you see the combination, then that's usually with another name T, but a ribbon tweeter, and you see some sort of silk dome beneath. But you can hear sort of when it's not quite as what do you say, harmony between the two as you have here.
Yeah, I think most people think that all you have to do with a loudspeaker is produce a flat frequency response. And as I said to my sales director the other day, when he was I introduced him to an early prototype of a pair of speakers that I'm working on. And he said, he told me what was wrong with them, which is great. I mean, that's what I need to hear. I need to have criticism of what people hear is wrong with things. And I said, okay, well, let me go and do some more work on the crossover. And he said, well, what do you have to do? And I said, well, I have to listen and refine and listen and refine. And he said, well, I thought all you did was produce a flat frequency response. And it suddenly occurred to me that that's what people think is necessary in speaker design. It's not. It's not. Funnily enough, when I'm doing a loudspeaker design, I will do somewhere, I mean, for Elysian, I think we were up to crossover number 36 for the Elysian 4 before I got the performance that I really wanted. All of those crossovers, all 36 of them, had a flat frequency response, but they all sounded different. It's the blend between the drive units. It's getting the best out of the drive units, and it's making sure that you do loads and loads and loads of listening. I'm talking thousands of hours go into speaker projects like that. in order to make the result as lifelike as possible and to get the passion and excitement of the musical performance across to the listener, so that when you're listening, you forget that you're listening to a hi-fi system and you just end up feeling that you're absorbed by the music.
I can agree that is absolutely the feeling I would want, at least. I don't think I know anybody who wouldn't like that to be the goal.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's always been my guiding principle ever since designed my first pair of speakers, the Haybrooke HB2s back in 1978. And you know, I've aimed to do that with every pair of speakers I've designed, and I think the number of awards that we've received over the years and the position that we've put Wharfedale in to date has been testament to using that system, that method of bringing a loudspeaker to market.
Could you tell us quickly, because we have here the Evo 4.4, we have the 4.3, the 4.2, and the 4.1.
Yeah.
What happens when you move down in size? Like, it's obvious with the 4.1 there just wasn't enough space to put in the second driver, the 2-inch Silk Dome here. But what else happens?
Yeah, as I say, the main problem is that when you move towards slimmer speakers, you don't get the power in the bass that you do with the larger speakers. Now, I understand that there are people who, you know, don't want to see big loudspeakers in their rooms, or they want to have something which they can hide away a little better in the room.
Or live with people who don't want them. Right?
Yeah, so you know, we make the Evo 4.3 slimmer than the 4.4 to meet those demands. But I would say that if you listen to the 4.3 versus the 4.4, you'd go out of the shop with the 4.4 every time, because it just sounds that much more involving, that it has that much more power to it.
What about the stand mounts? Now it sounds like if you move down in size,
again, stand mounts can do a really good job. It really depends on the level of bass performance that you want. You've got a bigger cabinet volume, you've got more bass drivers with the 4.4 than you have in the 4.2. That has an effect upon the efficiency of the system. So you get more output for every watt of amplifier power. And it also has an effect on the bass extension. So you get a much deeper, I mean, I seem to remember 4.4 goes down to about 35 hertz cleanly in the room. You won't get that from the 4.2, which goes down to about 42 hertz.
So that is, if you want something smaller, you got to compromise somewhere. That's just life.
You have, yeah. And it all depends what you want out of life. It all depends what you want out of your hi-fi system.
And then down here in the corner, I am hiding a Wharfedale Linton. Now this is quite a jump. That's quite something different, isn't it?
Yeah, that was quite something different. And this design came out of when we did our Wharfedale's 85th anniversary. I was in a meeting with the sales team, and they were saying, we've got to do something for the 85th anniversary. What should we do? And I said, well, why don't we go and look back into Wharfedale's history and pick what was Wharfedale's most loved and best-selling speaker at the time, which was a product called the Wharfedale Denton. And I was working in retail back in the early 70s and selling a lot of Wharfedale Dentons. So we did that. We brought out an 85th anniversary Denton. Obviously, it wasn't exactly like the original. It was very much up to date with the usual Wharfedale Kevlar drivers. But we had an immense response to it. People loved the way it looked. They loved its original looks, which was in the 70s, that was a groundbreaking design for a loudspeaker. But they also liked the slightly warm sound I gave it. which sort of harked back to the way that products sounded in the 60s and 70s. And so, based on the success of that, we said, okay, well, why don't we do the next one up in the range, which was the Linton. And as you can see, Linton is, again, quite a large loudspeaker. It goes against the trends of small, thin loudspeakers. And the drive units in the Linton, the bigger cabinet, the larger baffle size, again, gives it that bass power, that bass energy, that fullness of sound and warmth of sound that really has switched a lot of people on to what they probably some people used to be able to hear from the older style loudspeakers, but which they feel, I've been told by a lot of audiophiles that they've lost that sound which they remembered in modern loudspeakers. They don't get it from modern loudspeakers. And I had one person who said he'd been searching to replace his loudspeakers for the past 30 years. And until he heard Linton, he hadn't been able to do that. As soon as he heard Linton, he rushed out and bought a pair.
I recall you were actually showing off the Linton at the Copenhagen Hi-Fi show last year.
Yeah,
I know there were quite a few people there who agreed with that.
Well, there were. I mean, there were some people who came in the room and took one look and walked out again. And that's okay. That's fine. We know it don't suit everybody. But a lot of people stayed. And a lot more people came back for a second listen.
And I have to say, they do sound really impressive. And I'm not quite as old as the Dentons, but I've listened to speakers from that era, and I can say that they do bring some traits back from that time, so to say.
Well, it's getting the best out of what the larger speaker can do, which used to be, speaker that was considered a small loudspeaker back in the 70s. When I first started making loudspeakers as a hobby, a 12-inch bass unit was a small bass unit. If you wanted to be a real audiophile, you had a 15-inch bass unit. And an 8-inch unit was considered a mid-range. So to go back to having speakers with the larger baffles, the bigger bass unit sizes, it's been a joy for me to design. It makes my job as a designer so much easier.
Sorry, I just tuned out there. I was just looking at what questions we're getting. So I'm getting a question, Peter. Is there going to be a center channel in the Elysian series?
We are working on something. We introduced Elysian 2 and Elysian 4 on the basis that it was probably just going to be some flagship stereo loudspeakers. But then we got requests for, can we do an AV system based on Elysian?
Classic.
They're not going to be small. I'm not going to do a small center channel. If you want an Elysian center channel to perform the way I think a center channel should perform, it's going to be big. So
I've seen the Evo center channel. That thing is huge. Like that's a 4.3 just put down on the side. That's a big speaker.
Yeah, it's going to be something like that.
And then I'm also getting a question: what speaker is it you have behind you?
That I have behind me?
Yeah.
You mean these up here?
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought I'd give the Danish a little preview of that. Is also going to be part of the AV system. That is going to be something that you could use for the surrounds. So that will be you've got a little hidden preview of Elysian 1. But don't go telling everybody about it. It's top secret at the moment.
That's too late, Peter. We're going to spread that word everywhere. You know it. Well, then, I think we got that sorted out. If you want an Elysian home theater system, you can get one eventually.
Eventually, yeah. I think, I mean, Elysian 1 actually should be coming out the later this autumn, later this fall. And then next year we'll have the center channel.
And but while we're at it, when things come out, how has the response been to the Elysian and the Evo series and the Lintons? Because we know in Denmark they're hard to get a hold of.
Well, they are. I mean, we Yeah, we went into production expecting the usual run of sales,
Mm-hmm.
and we've been bowled over by the quantities that have sold. So much so that we've done our best to ramp up production at the factory, but obviously in this times of lockdown with the virus and so on, it's taken time for the factory to get up and running again and get fully get the number of employees we need back into service to get the products out. So I'm sorry for anybody who's had to wait, but we are doing our best to get back up to full production again and get the speakers to you.
And it is going to be worth the wait. That's what I hear when you explain to me about these speakers. They're quite impressive.
Absolutely, it's worth the wait. Yeah,
So
I
for
love them.
anybody waiting out there, it's just not just because we at HiFifreaks we're lazy. It's because you can't get a hold of them anywhere in Europe, at least.
Or America. There's a
Or America.
worldwide shortage. Yeah.
Well, that is both an evil and also a nice thing for once. Do we have any more questions? I'll just check here before we go on to the announcement. So, Peter, I heard that we're gonna leak something today.
Yes, this is something that I've been looking forward to for a long time, ever since I joined IAG, because I noticed in amongst their brand names that they had got hold of was Leak, and now at last we're introducing some Leak products, and we've started with a Leak amplifier, which, funnily enough, has been co-designed with Jan Ertner, who is he's the electronic side of me, if you like. So I'm director of acoustic design. He's the main engineer on the electronics design. He's Danish origin, so that'll be nice for all you Danes out there to have something that's designed by somebody who's got Danish blood. He's a very, very clever chap. His history goes back a long way to when he joined Quad, when I was still working with Mission in the UK, and he's a very, very talented electronics designer. So it's nice to let him loose on new Leak designs, and there will be more. We're starting off with something that's very reminiscent of the solid state designs that Leak did, still with much of the same styling. We didn't want to lose that because that's rather unique and in the world of audio these days. So yeah, that's going to be coming your way soon, and I'm looking forward to doing more work with Leak myself.
And the Leak being a retro design, I imagine it will fit nicely with a pair of Lintons.
Yeah,
Or at least the design-wise.
It would be. Indeed, it would be. The efficiency of the Lintons and the Leak amplifier will go very nicely together.
And we just had a question more for you, Peter. This is one of the, I would call it IAG classics. How is it possible to make such good sounding audio products at the price point you're making them at?
Well, it's no secret that a lot of our products are made in China, even though they're designed in the UK. We can do things out of our own factory, which a lot of manufacturers can't do. We can make everything from the ground up. So for the majority of our speakers, not in the case of Elysian, because Elysian uses, we make the AMT, but it uses drivers from Scandinavia for the mid-range and bass. But for the rest of the range, everything's made in-house in our factory. And we buy in the raw materials, we build everything up, we do all our own cabinet work, we even make our own cables. By doing that, we can keep costs down to a real absolute minimum. And I love doing that because I hate this idea of you've got to spend $100,000 in order to get high performance, because it limits the number of people who can enjoy that level of performance, that level of music making in their home. I want to get a very high level music making and enjoyment into as many people's homes as I can. So I love being able to make things at an affordable price.
The question, I just have to look away for just a second. This one was about Leak. Something about Leak. People want you to talk a bit more about Leak, Peter. Can you do that at this point, or is that confidential?
What, in terms of the plans we've got? I mean, the plans we've got are confidential. But all I can say is there will be more products coming right across the board.
More products across the board, and then we'll just do a final. Do we have some more questions out there? We're asked about high-end subwoofers. Is that something you have in the pipeline?
Not something that I envisage doing. Actually, there are so many specialist subwoofer designs out there that to compete with them is really quite tough, because we're a group that makes affordable loudspeakers that we've talked about on most levels. When you start looking at high-end subwoofers, they're incredibly specialized, and the drive units, the amplifier systems, the software that drives the amplifiers, make the whole thing work is so unbelievably sophisticated that we'd need a whole new research division in order to do it. And then when we look at how we could market these, it turns out that people who buy high-end subwoofers want to buy from a specialist subwoofer manufacturer. They don't necessarily want to buy from us. So at the moment, I'm not sure whether we think it's worth doing.
I have to say, at least with an Elysian, I wouldn't say you need one. But that's just my take on the few listening sessions I've had on that bad boy. It's that's got it all packed.
Certainly if you've got a Elysian 4, you don't need a subwoofer.
Yeah, sorry, right. The Elysian for the standard we got here. And then can I have a quick update from from my team here? Do we have more questions? I think we got through it, Peter. Is there anything else you would like to add here before we end?
Just really a bit of background as to why I think the things that I'm designing are rather different to the things that a lot of other hi-fi designers put out. And I'm not trying to say that I'm better than anybody else, just really put across my viewpoint that I wanted to, that I touched on already, and that is that the main aspect of hi-fi is not to make a thrilling sound. And I do meet a lot of people and go into a lot of rooms at shows and listen to products which make an absolutely wonderful sound. I mean, they're really thrilling in terms of the way, the bass rumbles and the treble shimmers, and the mid-range is quite forceful. But I find that they're there just to make an impressive sound. They're not doing anything for me in terms of music. Now, reproducing music is actually a very, very difficult thing to do. It's as difficult as making a musical instrument in itself. We all know that you can get different sounds of violins, you can get different sounds of pianos. They're all based upon the same technology, but the use of materials, the way that they're put together, with respect to violins, for example, people have talked about the woods used, where the trees are grown, the types of lacquers used on the wood and so on, all to get a special tone out of a violin. Very much the same with loudspeakers, that we have to marry the technology that we have at our disposal to put together what is essentially a musical instrument. Now, not in terms of a musical instrument in the way that it makes sound, but as a musical instrument in the way that it conveys the performance, the musical performance. And I believe that music is touching our emotions in a way that very few methods of entertainment can. You know, when we read a book, we have to try and imagine what the author had in mind. When we watch a movie, we're shown the characters up front. We don't get, we get almost like a third person emotional attachment to a movie. But with music, it's direct. It's wired straight into our brains that we get this emotional reaction. And if I'm designing something and it's sounding great, but it's not engaging me emotionally, then there's something wrong with it. And there'll reach a point in any loudspeaker design where you're just sitting there and you suddenly think, I'm just lost in the music. And that's the point at which you know the design is right.
Well, I'm very happy you designed them that way. It sounds like that's a more comfortable listening experience. I also have to say I noticed that again at the Copenhagen Hi-Fi show that your playlists are quite different from anything else you hear out there. It seems like you're trying to show something different.
Yeah, well, some people do ask me, you know, what's your favorite music to use for designing loudspeakers? And actually, I use everything from opera through to hip hop. I mean, it's just, you have to make a loudspeaker which will sound great on all types of music. If you don't do that, then there's something wrong with the loudspeaker.
We have a last minute question here. A person is asking, I'm struggling with my 9.1 speakers. How do I get the best bass out of them?
How many subwoofers do you have?
Well, one, I imagine.
Okay, first of all, one subwoofer in a room is not going to power the room. It's long been known that you need at least two subwoofers in a room in order to power the room. If you've got a 9.1 system, you could go as far as having a subwoofer in each corner. And I know it sounds ridiculous, but the more diaphragm area, the more air that you can move, the better balanced it's going to be. But if you've only got one subwoofer, you definitely need two.
And then I'll actually bring up a question because I get this one a lot. So people ask me, should you get one large subwoofer or two smaller ones? When you can't have two large ones, of course.
The benefits of a large subwoofer is very much the same as the benefits of any large loudspeaker. The greater volume, the greater diaphragm area means that you get more power output. And in terms of acoustic power output, I'm talking about, not electrical power. Now, you know, people try and make small subwoofers with huge amplifiers, but really all you're doing is overloading the drive unit. If you look at the extent that a small drive unit has to move compared to a big one, the linearity of a larger drive unit is much, much better because it has to move so much less. So I would say a larger subwoofer is better than two smaller ones every time. But but on the other hand, two subwoofers are better than one.
And we got that on record. I will mention that to everybody asking me. So we'll just check. It seems there's one more question for us, Peter.
Yeah.
I think we both thought this was going to take half an hour, but apparently people like us, or at least have questions for us. I'm not sure that's the same thing.
No problem for me.
So just hang on a second. I can see they're bringing them to me. What is the best REAK album to test your fine speakers?
So what is the best?
REAK, R-E-K album.
I have no idea what that is.
Guys, you just threw me under a bus there. My team threw me under a bus. They're just bringing things that I then read aloud, and then we sit there. Now we look like idiots, Peter.
Okay, so this isn't the Danish word then, REAK.
Well, I have no idea.
You don't.
Well, what is the best album? We'll just ask. What is the best album? What is there? You said you listen to everything. But
Yeah.
is there maybe something you listen a little more to when you test speakers?
Oh, it depends what mood I'm in, because mood is part of being receptive to the emotion of the musical performance. So
Uh-huh.
it will depend a lot on that. But there are a few basics which I always go back to, if you like.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got a playlist of about 40 albums, well, 40 tracks, I should say, not 40 albums, but 40 tracks, which if you come to any of our demonstrations, you'll hear most of them. There's if you want one disc with variety on, then 40 Days by the Wailing Jennies is a good test disc, because it's got different performances, different instruments, and even slightly different studio recordings on it. That's a nice one to find out whether the vocals are very natural, whether the guitars are very natural, whether the percussion sounds natural. It's a good test.
I think we also just got a correction. The writer wanted to write recommended album, so I think we got that
Ah,
question covered.
okay. Well, I keep on discovering new ones. I mean,
Yeah,
and
music doesn't stop; it keeps going. That's also why it's exciting to get new speakers every once in
absolutely,
a while.
absolutely. And the great thing about streaming these days is that with things like Qobuz and so on, you can get very high quality streaming. And now I can go and read a review in a magazine, or I can hear a performance on a radio, a snatch of a song on a radio, and then go back home and immediately access that. I don't have to go to a record shop anymore like I used to. And then I don't have to worry about whether I should spend my $15 on this particular recording, because now I can just go and hear it straight away. That's absolutely fabulous. I love that. And it means I can discover all sorts of new bits of music that I never did before.
Yeah, I have to agree. Like people often ask us, what streaming service do you use? Maybe you use something cheap that's not good quality. And I have to admit, it's the same thing. Sometimes you sit down for a long listening session, you take something high res, but something where it's just got to be easy. You can even do with a cheap streaming service, just because it's so convenient to have all your music right there. I have to agree with that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I think that concludes our Q&A session, Peter. Thank you very much for taking time to talk with us here on a busy Tuesday evening. I hope it's a little colder in the UK, because here we're absolutely dying in the heat. I have to say that.
It's warm and humid here as well.
But please stay on with the call you're on right now, just for a second. I'll just round off with our listeners. I'll just say thank you very much for tuning into the Freaky Show. We hope you enjoyed it. Leave any extra questions you might have in the comments, and we will see if we can follow up on them later. This is only the second installment in the series, and we like that you're taking it very nicely. So we think we will continue with doing this every once in a while, giving you a little behind the scenes on all these wonderful speakers. So thank you very much for looking with and staying with us, and tune in the next time in the Freaky